tell me your name and spell it as you wish it to appear?
My name is Marjorie Williams Kinard. Marjorie Williams Kinard.
Thank you, Marjorie. Tell me a little bit about your family history.
Well, my grandparents on my father's side were born in Florence, South Carolina. And my father was born in Florence. He was the youngest of 12 children. He came to Washington when he was about 20 years old and met my mother. On my mother's side, her family was from Opelika, Alabama. My grandmother and grandfather met at Tuskegee. It was normal school then, but of course it's Tuskegee University now. And they married and moved to Washington in 1909. And my mother is one of 10 children, and she was born in Washington, D.C.
Wow. And what has it been like kind of finding different things from your family's history, pictures and stories?
It's been wonderful. And of course, I guess I call myself the family historian. And I've done a lot of work on ancestry and connecting with other members of the family to get their history. Then we have a family member who is deceased now, but she lived in Florida, and an older cousin who did a lot of research on the family. So I've kind of been interested in it for a long, long time.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Is there any pictures you have that really stand out to you or represent a certain time period or even strike a curiosity?
Yes, I have some pictures that were passed down to me by my eldest aunt. And of course, they're very old pictures, and they're snapshots of my uncles and my aunts. There was even one there that I remember of my mother and my aunt and uncle when they may have been about 4 or 5 years old. I love those pictures, and I looked at them quite often.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about Columbian Army Cemetery. Is this a memorial ground that some of your family is buried?
Yes. Of course, I didn't know too much about the old Harmony. A lot of my relatives are in the new Harmony as it is now. But my grandmother was in the old Harmony, and I think she was one of those 37,000 that were taken over to what I'm calling the new Harmony. I'm just saying that for purposes of this discussion, because the old Columbia Harmony was what we knew it as. And they say that when they brought those remains, when it was time for them to do something with those remains, they notified the family. But I don't think they notified us, because had they notified us, we would have gone and had a grave marker for my grandmother. So I think they just took her with the rest over to the new Harmony. Now, my other relatives are at the new Harmony because my grandfather bought plots for all of his children, and so they're there. And my grandmother is there too, but we don't have anything for her. But we were thinking about even now trying to erect something there in her memory too.
Now, several stones have been recovered from the Potomac River.
Mm-hmm.
Is it your hope that perhaps her stone might be found?
I wish. I really wish, but I haven't heard anything so far about her, so I don't know. But it's really such a terrible thing that it happened the way it did, but it's characteristic of other African American cemeteries in Washington and really across the United States, that a lot of care, when developers are interested in something, they don't care about what really happens to the remains. And actually, I was on Facebook one night and reading the article about Old Harmony Cemetery, and it kind of struck me in a way that they said that some of the grave markers were still strewn around a tree in the area of the Home Depot where they did the construction and everything for the what's over there now. And that began my research into finding a founder of Delta Sigma Theta that was in the old Columbia and was one of those brought over to the New Harmony.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about Delta Sigma Theta. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, Delta Sigma Theta is an international sorority of professional women. We were founded in 1913 on the campus of Howard University, and we have graduate chapters and collegiate chapters all over the world. We have about 300,000 members of the organization. And of course, in Washington, there are two chapters, the Washington, D.C. Alumni Chapter and the Federal City Chapter. And there are about 5 or 6 collegiate chapters at the universities here in Washington. And I belong to the Washington, D.C. Alumni Chapter, and we were charged with the responsibility of finding Olive Jones, one of the founders of Delta Sigma Theta.
In terms of finding where she is buried?
Yes, in finding where she was buried. And it was very interesting that I, at that time, was the historian and chair of the Heritage and Archives Committee and had already done independent study of my own about Old Harmony Cemetery and I studied all of the cemeteries in Washington, all of the black cemeteries. So when that charge was given to us, something just said to me, depending on where she lived at the time on 15th Street Northwest, she must have been buried there at Old Columbia. But I had no proof of it. I went to, along with some of my committee members, went to the New Harmony and asked if there was any record of her, and they said no. But I had a feeling that there was, and I pressed it. Now that's what a lot of families don't do. They don't press it to find out what may have happened. Anyway, to make a long story short, I kept pressing and was told that some remains were brought there from other cemeteries around the city. And something just told me she was there. And I contacted the manager. I said, is there any other way we can find people buried here without it being in your database? And she told me that the cemetery has an archivist, and the archivist was contacted, and he, Paul Sluby, was the archivist, and he had recorded information on every individual moved from Old Columbia over to the New Harmony. And I was allowed to look through those records, and I found her name. And that's how we got her. The Deltas, of course, were very happy, and one thing led to another, so we were able to at least put a grave marker there. But hopefully she will be involved on the wall that the project is trying to do.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Absolutely fantastic.
it is.
So you know where her plot is at New Harmony?
We know where the mass grave is.
Yes.
And that's where that we know where that is. But then we have a stone for her there with our other founders, because we have 2 other founders there too.
Fantastic. Obviously, to find the original stone would be pretty.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Now, one of the gravestones that were floating down the Potomac River belonged to the second national president of Delta Sigma Theta, who was also a charter member of our chapter, and her name was Dorothy Pelham Beckley. And her stone has been discovered. And of course, we know the family, and so hopefully the family will do whatever it wants to do. But she is also in that mass grave.
Amazing history and amazing work that you've done.
Thank you.
And we're really honored to have you as part of our project.
Thank you.
Anything you'd like to say in closing, just about history, family, the African American community of DC?
I'm just so pleased to have been involved in this project, because as I see it, it's restorative justice. There have been so many remains moved from cemetery to cemetery without families having any knowledge about it. And families are looking for relatives because we're in the search for our kinfolk, our ancestors. And some of them will never be found because they don't know where to go. They don't know what questions to ask. And development has taken over, and it continues to take over. I've been doing personal study, even on YouTube, looking across the United States and how cemeteries have been impacted by construction, and with total disregard, in some cases, for the fact that cemeteries are there and buildings are built on top of them. Just like here in Washington, Fletcher Johnson School was built on a cemetery, and they saw some of the skeletal remains under that had floated. I guess you could say because of the rain, they were just floating. Even though some of the graves were moved over to the New Harmony, there were still remains around. I don't know. It's totally disconcerting to those of us who are concerned about cemeteries, about our ancestors who deserve to be interred for a lifetime. And it's really interesting because it lets me know that when we bury our deceased, it does not now mean that they're there for an eternity. And that's what people think when they have funerals and they spend a lot of money on caskets, and they take and bury their people. It may be there 50 years, maybe 75 or 100. But if that cemetery is abandoned, or if the developers feel that they want that property, they can get that property through hook and crook. And that's what I'm very concerned about. I thank you for this opportunity to say a few words, and I appreciate it so much.
Bravo, brilliant.
Thank you.
Very lovely.